Purple flames danced across the ceremonial braziers as 12 different species gathered in the council chambers. Ambassador Krell adjusted his scaled collar and smiled with too many teeth. Today marked 3 years since the last human had died, and the galaxy was finally at peace. The reptilian Vorth delegate moved between the floating platforms where each species maintained their environmental bubbles. Water-breathing aquans floated in their liquid spheres while the crystalline shard delegates pulsed with satisfied light patterns. Everyone seemed happy except for the bird-like Lyrans, who kept their feathers close to their bodies and spoke, in whispers. "Fellow council members," Krell announced, his voice carrying through the translation devices, "we celebrate not just survival, but the dawn of a new galactic age. The human plague has been cleansed from our stars." Holographic displays showed the bombardment footage once again, Earth burning, the moon cracking, space stations exploding in silent bursts of light. Krell had watched these recordings hundreds of times, savoring each moment. Humans had been expanding too fast, asking too many questions, making too many other species uncomfortable with their strange ideas about cooperation and equality. The mantid delegate clicked his mandibles in approval. The humans were spreading their dangerous concepts: democracy, individual rights, scientific sharing. Such chaos could not be allowed. Other species nodded or made their equivalent gestures. The elephant-like titans raised their trunks. The floating energy beings called the wisps flickered brighter. Even the normally peaceful plant-based chlorins rustled their leaves in agreement. But not everyone celebrated with the same enthusiasm. Maya watched the ceremony from the viewing gallery above, hidden among a group of Lyran researchers. Her surgically altered face looked almost bird-like in the dim lighting, and her modified vocal cords let her speak their language perfectly. 3 years of hiding among different alien populations had taught her many survival skills. She remembered watching Earth die from her research station near the edge of the system. Dr. Maya Rodriguez had been studying deep space bacteria when the Council fleet arrived. Her long-range sensors picked up the energy signatures of the bombardment weapons charging. She had tried to warn Earth, but the jamming fields were already active. For 72 hours, she watched her world burn. Her family, her friends, her entire species reduced to radioactive dust. The research station's limited supplies gave her maybe 2 months to live. But Maya had always been resourceful. She raided abandoned mining stations, salvaged what she could from destroyed ships, and slowly made her way to the outer territories. The hardest part was not the physical survival. It was learning to live with the knowledge that Earth's destruction had been planned long before any supposed justification. Maya had spent months in the data archives of various alien libraries, piecing together the real timeline. The Council had decided to eliminate humanity 6 months before the first incident they claimed had triggered the war. The human disease of curiosity infected many species. Krell continued his speech. They asked questions about our traditions, challenged our methods, suggested improvements to systems that had worked for thousands of years. Some of you even began adopting their chaotic practices. Maya saw several delegates shift uncomfortably. The Lyran next to her, a scholar named Thys, whispered to her companion, "This does not honor the memory codes. Truth should be spoken in these halls." During her 3 years among the aliens, Maya had learned that many species held deep regrets about the human genocide. The Vorth had pressured smaller civilizations with economic threats. They had fabricated evidence of human aggression and suppressed testimony from species who had positive relationships with Earth's colonies. The aquatic Mer had been particularly close to human researchers, sharing ocean-world terraforming techniques. Their delegate sat silent in her water sphere, tentacles barely moving. Maya had read the classified communications between Mer and Vorth leadership. The ocean people had been threatened with trade embargo and military action if they opposed the human extermination. "Some of you harbored sympathy for the human contamination." Krell's voice grew harder. "But see how much better our galaxy functions now. No more dangerous experiments. No more questions about why things must be done certain ways. No more disruption of the natural order." The shard delegate's crystalline body dimmed noticeably. Maya knew why. Humans had been the first species to successfully communicate with the shard through harmonic resonance patterns. Before contact with Earth, the shard had been isolated for centuries, unable to make other species understand their light-based language. Human scientists had developed translation matrices that let the shard participate in galactic civilization for the first time. Maya's modified fingers traced the small device hidden in her robes. 3 years of careful preparation had led to this moment. She had evidence that could destroy the Vorth's version of history: communications logs, financial records, testimony from survivors of coerced species. Everything needed to prove that humanity's destruction had been a planned genocide, not a defensive war. But evidence alone would not be enough. She needed to be in the right place, at the right time, speaking to the right audience. And that place was here, in the heart of the council chambers during their celebration of human extinction. Today we also honor those council members who made the difficult decision to prioritize galactic stability over misplaced sentiment. Krell gestured toward several specific delegates. Their wisdom saved us all from the human chaos. More uncomfortable, shifting. Maya counted at least 6 species whose representatives looked genuinely disturbed by the ceremony. The Vorth had overplayed their hand by making this celebration so public and so cruel. Many aliens had convinced themselves that the human extinction was necessary, but watching Krell gloat over the death of an entire species was making some of them reconsider. As the ceremony continued, Maya prepared for the most dangerous part of her plan. Tomorrow the council would begin its regular session period. She would need to find a way from the viewing galleries down to the main floor. Her forged credentials as a Lyran research aide would only get her so far. But Maya had something the Vorth had never expected. She had survived, and with her survival came the possibility of justice, truth, and perhaps even hope for the scattered human refugees hiding throughout the galaxy. The aliens thought they had ended the human story. They were about to learn that some stories refuse to die. Rain fell in strange patterns on the alien world of Nexus 7. Maya pulled her hood tighter as she walked through the crowded refugee market. 3 different species haggled over food supplies, while children with too many eyes or not enough. Limbs played between the stalls. This was home now, among the displaced and forgotten. The market existed in the shadow of a massive Vorth processing facility, where alien refugees worked for barely enough credits to survive. Maya had been here for 8 months, long enough to perfect her cover identity as Kira, a displaced Lyran researcher whose homeworld had been caught in a territorial dispute. Her surgically altered features and practiced mannerisms made the deception complete. She stopped at a data terminal and inserted her forged credit chip. The screen flickered to life, displaying news from across the council territories. Another celebration of human extinction, this time on the Mantid homeworld. Another memorial to the brave council forces who had cleansed the galaxy of the human threat. Maya's jaw tightened as she scrolled past the propaganda, but buried in the back channels encoded messages and encrypted data streams, she found what she was looking for. Other survivors were out there. The mining crew from the Titan Belt who had been working the asteroid fields when Earth died. A diplomatic team that had been negotiating trade agreements 3 systems away. Even a few military units who had been on long-range patrol when the bombardment began. Maya had been careful in her attempts to contact them. The Vorth monitored communications constantly, looking for any sign of remaining human activity. But she had learned to use the refugee networks, passing messages through a dozen different species and translation matrices until they became untraceable whispers in the galactic data stream. The response from David Park, formerly of the Earth Mining Consortium, had come through 5 different relay points before reaching her. 47 humans alive in the Outer Rim, hiding among the miners and traders who asked no questions about identity papers. They had salvaged equipment, established small bases on dead worlds, and were slowly building the resources they would need to survive long-term. Another message came from someone calling herself Agent Blue, whose military background suggested she might be from the old Earth Defense Forces. 18 survivors in various locations. mostly former intelligence operatives and special forces personnel. They had skills that went beyond simple survival, but lacked the scientific knowledge and diplomatic contacts Maya had been accumulating. The most promising contact was Dr. Lisa Hayes, who claimed to have been part of a xenobiology research expedition when the attack occurred. Her group had been studying extremophile bacteria in the radioactive zones near neutron stars, perfectly positioned to remain hidden, but also gathering intelligence on Vorth military movements and communications protocols. Maya deleted the messages and paid for her terminal time. Information was just the beginning. Over the past 3 years, she had been building something much more valuable, a network of alien allies who were beginning to question the official story of human extinction. Working in the refugee camps gave her access to species that the Vorth considered unimportant, the furry, cat-like Purians who had been displaced by mining operations, the insectoid buzzers whose hive worlds had been claimed for Vorth agricultural projects, the shape-shifting flows who existed as pure energy and were barely considered alive by carbon-based species. These forgotten peoples remembered things the Council preferred to ignore. The Purians talked about human aid workers who had helped rebuild their cities after natural disasters. The buzzers shared stories of human scientists who had developed new hive construction techniques that increased their population by 20%. The flows spoke in their strange harmonic language about human philosophers who had been the first to recognize their sentience. Maya also learned about the coercion and threats that had forced many species to support the human genocide. The aquatic mer had been promised exclusive fishing rights in human-controlled star systems if they voted for extermination. The crystalline shard had been threatened with sonic weapons that could shatter their bodies if they opposed the motion. Most importantly, she discovered that several major species had abstained from the vote entirely. The Lyrans, with their cultural obsession with truth and memory, had refused to participate in what they considered a violation of council law. The tree-like arbors had withdrawn their delegate rather than vote for genocide. Even some Vorth had privately opposed the extermination, though they lacked the political power to resist their leadership. Walking back to her small apartment in the refugee quarter, Maya reviewed her mental checklist. She had evidence of the conspiracy. She had contacts with other human survivors. She had identified potential alien allies. But she still lacked the most crucial element: access to the council chambers where she could present her case to the galaxy. The solution came from an unexpected source. Theus, the Lyran scholar she had befriended, mentioned over dinner that her research group had been selected to attend the upcoming council sessions. They were presenting a paper on historical memory preservation that had caught the attention of progressive delegates. The council chambers have not heard Lyran voices in too many cycles, Theus explained, her feathered head tilting in the way that indicated deep thought. Perhaps it is time for truth to be spoken in those halls again. Maya nodded and made appropriate scholarly comments, but her mind was racing. Lyran research teams were small, usually 3 to 5 individuals. Their delegation would have access to the main council chambers, the data archives, and most importantly, the communication systems that could broadcast across the galaxy. Over the following weeks, Maya carefully positioned herself to join the research team. Her expertise in xenobiology and her years of refugee aid work made her valuable to the Lyran's memory preservation project. When one of their researchers fell ill with a rare fungal infection, Maya was the obvious replacement. The forged credentials identifying her as Kira of Lyra would pass casual inspection, but Maya knew that council security was more thorough than refugee camp records. She would need perfect knowledge of Lyran culture, flawless language skills, and absolute confidence in her cover identity. But she also needed something more. Maya spent her final weeks on Nexus 7 gathering the last pieces of evidence she would need to prosecute the Vorth and their allies for genocide. Financial records showing bribery and coercion, communication logs revealing the planned nature of the attack, testimony from alien survivors who had witnessed the lies and fabrications. Standing in her empty apartment on her last night, Maya looked out at the strange alien constellations. Somewhere among those stars were the other human survivors, waiting for word that they were not alone. Somewhere else, the aliens who had ordered her species' extinction slept peacefully, believing they had succeeded completely. Maya touched the data storage device hidden in her modified clothing. 3 years of patient work had brought her to this moment. Tomorrow she would board a transport ship bound for the council stations. In a few days she would walk into the chambers where her species had been declared extinct. The Vorth thought the human story was over. Maya was about to show them that the most dangerous human trait had never been their technology, or their expansion, or their questions about authority. It was their refusal to stay dead when someone tried to kill them. Security scanners hummed as Maya passed through the final checkpoint into Concordia Station. Her modified Lyran features showed no emotion, but inside she felt her human heart beating faster than any bird person's should. The massive station stretched out before her, a city in space that housed the government of 12 star systems. The Lyran research delegation moved through the crowded corridors with typical scholarly dignity. Thois led their small group, carrying data tablets and making quiet observations about the station's architecture. Maya, still using her identity as Kira, stayed close to the team while memorizing every security camera, every guard post, every emergency exit. Their quarters were in the academic sector, far from the main council chambers but close to the archives and research facilities. Maya unpacked her few possessions and activated the small scanning device hidden in her personal items. The walls were clean of surveillance equipment, but she knew that could change without warning. The opening ceremonies begin tomorrow, Thissy informed the group as they gathered for their evening meal. We will have access to the main chambers for our presentation, but only during the designated academic period. Council security is quite strict about unauthorized access. Maya nodded and asked intelligent questions about their research presentation, while her mind worked on more immediate problems. She had 3 days to plant her evidence caches throughout the station, establish communication links with the outside, galaxy, and position herself for the moment when she would reveal herself to the council. The first night she explored. Concordia Station operated on a 26-hour cycle to accommodate different species' biological needs. During the quiet period that passed for night, Maya slipped out of her quarters and began mapping the station's hidden spaces. Maintenance tunnels ran behind the walls. Service corridors connected different sectors. Emergency airlocks provided access to the station's exterior. More importantly, she found the communication hub that controlled all data transmission to and from the station. The Vorth had installed additional security measures since the human extinction, but their technology was based on older principles that Maya's Earth training had prepared her to defeat. Working carefully in the darkness, she installed quantum transmitters in 7 different locations throughout the station. Each device was smaller than her fingertip and would remain dormant until activated by her biometric signature. When the time came, they would broadcast her message simultaneously across all council communication networks, making it impossible for the Vorth to jam or intercept. The second day brought the opening ceremonies. Maya sat in the designated Lyran section and watched as Ambassador Krell delivered his annual address about galactic prosperity and security. The reptilian diplomat looked older than he had during the celebration 3 years ago, but his voice still carried the same cold satisfaction when he mentioned the successful elimination of the human threat. The galaxy remains at peace because we had the courage to remove a dangerous element, Krell told the assembled delegates. Some still question whether such extreme measures were necessary, but results speak louder than sentiment. No major conflicts in 3 years. No destabilizing expansions. No challenges to established order. Several delegates from smaller species shifted uncomfortably in their environmental suits. Maya recognized the signs she had learned to read during her years among refugees. Guilt, uncertainty, and growing doubt about decisions they had supported or failed to oppose. But she also saw the species who genuinely supported what had been done. The mantid delegate clicked his mandibles in approval. The energy beings called. The wisps pulsed with satisfied light patterns. Even some of the normally peaceful Chlorans rustled their leaves in agreement with Krell's words. After the ceremony, Maya mingled with the other academic observers. Her Lyran appearance and perfect, Language skills let her move freely among the scholar groups from different species. She listened to private conversations, gauged reactions to Krell's speech, and identified the delegates who seemed most troubled by the human extinction. The aquatic mer delegation was particularly interesting. Their representative, Ambassador Coral, remained in her water-filled transport sphere, but her tentacles moved in agitation whenever humans were mentioned. Maya had read the classified communications between Mir and Vorth leadership. The ocean people had been promised exclusive access to human water worlds if they supported the extermination vote. The crystalline shard delegate presented another opportunity. The geometric being's light patterns had dimmed noticeably during Krell's speech about eliminating dangerous questions and challenges to established order. Maya knew that humans had been the first species to develop successful communication protocols with the shard, giving them a voice in galactic affairs for the first time in centuries. On the third night, Maya made her final preparations. She activated a quantum communicator and sent coded messages to the human survivors scattered across the galaxy. The message was simple: watch the Council broadcast tomorrow. After 3 years of hiding and planning, the truth about Earth's destruction was about to be revealed. She also planted data storage devices in locations throughout the station. Each one contained copies of the evidence she had gathered during her 3 years among the refugees. Financial records showing Vorth, bribes and threats, communication logs proving the planned nature of the attack, testimony from alien witnesses who had seen the lies and fabrications used to justify genocide. The morning of the academic presentations arrived with artificial sunlight streaming through Concordia's massive viewing ports. Maya dressed carefully, in formal Lyran robes, and checked her hidden equipment one final time. The quantum transmitters were ready. The evidence caches were positioned. The galaxy-wide communication network was waiting for her activation codes. This led the Lyran delegation through security checkpoints and into the main council chambers. The space was enormous, with environmental platforms floating at different levels to accommodate species with varying atmospheric needs. At the center, a speaking platform awaited the various academic presentations. Maya took her place in the Lyran observation area and looked around the chamber. Ambassador Krell sat in the primary Vorth position, flanked by his military advisors and diplomatic staff. Other species delegates occupied their traditional locations, some in atmospheric bubbles, others on platforms adjusted for their specific environmental needs. The academic presentations began with a mantid scholar discussing hive construction techniques. Then a shard researcher demonstrated new harmonic communication methods. Maya watched and waited as her heart rate climbed higher and higher. Finally, Theiss was called to present the Lyran research on historical memory preservation. The bird-like scholar approached the speaking platform and began her prepared remarks about the importance of maintaining accurate historical records for future generations. Truth must be preserved, Theiss said, her translated words echoing through the chamber. Even when that truth is uncomfortable or challenges our current understanding, the memory codes demand that we remember not just our successes, but also our failures and mistakes. Maya stood up. She walked down from the observation area toward the main floor. Several security guards noticed her movement but did not yet react, assuming she was part of the Lyran presentation team. History will judge us not by the stories we tell ourselves, Theiss continued, but by the accuracy of the records we leave for those who come after us. Maya reached the edge of the main floor. She touched the hidden activator that would bring her quantum transmitters online. Across the galaxy, communication networks prepared to receive her broadcast. Sometimes, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's audio systems, history refuses to stay buried. She stepped onto the speaking platform and let her disguise fall away. The surgical alterations that had made her look Lyran dissolved under the neutralizing agent she had applied. Her true human features emerged as she stood before the assembled representatives of the species that had declared her kind extinct. Ambassador Krell's jaw fell open, revealing rows of predatory teeth. Other delegates began shouting in their various languages. Security forces moved toward the platform, but Maya was already activating her transmitters. "My name is Dr. Maya Rodriguez," she announced as her words broadcast across the galaxy. 3 years ago, you declared my species extinct, but some stories, Excellencies, refuse to die when someone tries to kill them. Chaos erupted across the council chambers as delegates realized what they were seeing. A human woman stood on the speaking platform, alive and addressing the galaxy that had declared her species extinct. Shouts in 12 different languages filled the air while security forces pushed through the crowd toward Maya's position. Impossible, Ambassador Krell snarled, his reptilian features twisting with rage and disbelief. The humans are dead. All of them. We made certain of that. Maya smiled, without warmth. You made certain of many things, Ambassador, but certainty and truth are not always the same thing. She gestured and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber. The quantum transmitters hidden around the station projected her, evidence for everyone to see. Financial records appeared in the air, showing massive credit transfers from Vorth accounts to smaller species just days before the extinction vote. The Purian delegation received 40 million credits from Vorth industrial accounts, Maya announced as her words broadcast across the galaxy. The Buzzer Hive worlds were promised exclusive mining rights in human territory. The shape-shifting flow energy beings were offered protection from mantid expansion in exchange for their support. More displays activated, communication logs filled the air, showing private messages between Vorth leadership and other species. Maya had spent 3 years in refugee camps and alien archives, piecing together the conspiracy that had destroyed her world. Ambassador Krell's own messages revealed the timeline. Maya continued as security forces tried to reach her through the crowd. The decision to eliminate humanity was made 6 months before the first incident you claimed justified our extinction. You fabricated evidence, suppressed testimony from species friendly to humans, and threatened economic warfare against anyone who opposed your plans. The aquatic mer delegate's tentacles writhed in her water sphere. Ambassador Coral finally spoke, her translated words carrying across the chamber. These are lies. Vorth financial assistance was for legitimate development projects, not bribes for voting support. Maya turned toward the Mer delegation and activated another display. Your own communications say otherwise, Ambassador Coral. Here is your message to the Mer High Council. The Vorth offer exclusive fishing rights in 5 human water worlds if we support their extinction proposal. Opposition will result in trade embargo and possible military action. Silence fell across the chamber as the translated text appeared in the air for all to read. Ambassador Coral's tentacles went completely still. Other delegates began looking at each other with new suspicion, wondering what private communications might be revealed next. This is terrorism, Krell declared, finally finding his voice. A dead species attempting to destabilize galactic peace through lies and fabrications. Security, arrest this creature immediately. But the security forces had stopped moving. Several of them belonged to species that were now seeing their leaders' private communications displayed in the air. A Purian guard looked at financial records showing how his people had been bought. A Buzzer security officer saw messages discussing the exploitation of his hive worlds. Maya activated the next phase of her evidence presentation. Video recordings filled the chamber, showing human colonies that had been thriving peacefully just weeks before the bombardment. Schools where human children learned alongside alien exchange students. Research facilities where human and alien scientists worked together on projects that benefited multiple species. You told the galaxy that humans were aggressive expansionists, threatening galactic stability, Maya said. But these recordings show the reality. Human colonies that provided disaster relief to alien worlds. Human researchers who shared medical advances freely. Human diplomats who mediated disputes between other species. The crystalline shard delegates' light patterns fluctuated wildly. Maya knew why. Before human contact, the shard had been isolated, for centuries, unable to communicate with carbon-based species. Human scientists had developed the harmonic translation matrices that let them participate in galactic civilization. The Shard people had no voice in council affairs for 300 years, Maya continued. Human acoustic engineers created the translation systems that allowed them to join galactic society. In return, you voted to exterminate the species that gave you your voice. The Shard delegate's crystalline body went completely dark. Other Shard representatives throughout the chamber dimmed their light patterns in what Maya recognized as their expression of shame. But not everyone was convinced. The Mantid delegate clicked his mandibles aggressively. Even if some records are accurate, the human threat was real. Their democratic ideas, their questions about traditional authority, their disruption of established order. The galaxy is more stable without them. Maya had been waiting for this argument. She activated her final evidence cache, the one that would destroy any remaining justification for human extinction. "You speak of threats and disruption," she said. "Let me show you what the galaxy has lost." New displays appeared, showing medical advances that human researchers had been developing. Cures for diseases that affected 6 different species. Agricultural techniques that could have fed billions of hungry aliens. Clean energy systems that would have eliminated resource conflicts between star systems. Dr. Emma Watson was 3 months away from completing a cure for mounted hive rot disease when your bombardment killed her, Maya announced. Her research could have saved millions of your people over the next century, but you chose to destroy her along with my entire species. The Mantid delegate's clicking fell silent. Hive rot was a devastating disease that killed thousands of his people every year. His compound eyes focused on the displays showing research data that could have solved one of his species' greatest health challenges. Maya continued revealing the cost of human extinction. Environmental restoration projects that had been canceled. Diplomatic initiatives that could have prevented 3 recent wars. Scientific research that would have advanced galactic civilization by decades. "You did not eliminate a threat," she told the silent chamber. "You eliminated the species that was working hardest to help all of you." Ambassador Krell made one final attempt to regain control. "Even if some of this evidence is legitimate, it changes nothing. The humans are extinct. This individual is clearly some kind of clone or artificial construct designed to destabilize our government." Maya smiled and activated her personal communication device. "Dr. Lisa Hayes, are you receiving this transmission?" A new voice filled the chamber, speaking clear human English before the translation systems converted it to council standard. "Loud and clear, Maya. 37 survivors standing by in the Outer Rim territories." Another voice joined the transmission. "David Park here, representing 49 humans in the mining territories. We're alive and we have ships." More voices followed. Human survivors scattered across the galaxy, hidden among refugee populations and forgotten worlds, all confirming that the extinction had been incomplete. The Vorth had failed in their genocide. The chamber erupted in new chaos as delegates realized the implications. Living humans meant potential witnesses to Vorth crimes. Living humans meant possible testimony about the conspiracy. Living humans meant that the official story of human extinction was a lie that could no longer be maintained. Maya stood quietly in the center of the storm, watching as 3 years of careful planning reached its climax. Around her, the representatives of 12 species struggled to comprehend that the galactic order they had accepted was built on genocide, lies, and the systematic suppression of truth. But she was not finished yet. The evidence was presented, the survivors revealed, the conspiracy exposed. Now came the most dangerous part of her plan. Now she had to demand justice from the same beings who had tried to exterminate her species. "The question now," Maya announced, as her voice cut through the chaos, "is what you intend to do about it." The silence that followed Maya's challenge stretched across the chamber like a held breath. 12 species stared at the human woman who had just destroyed their version of galactic history. Some delegates looked ashamed, others angry, and a few seemed genuinely terrified of what might come next. Ambassador Krell recovered first, his reptilian features hardening into cold fury. "Even if humans survived, even if some of our methods were questionable, the basic threat remains. This individual's presence here proves human deception and infiltration capabilities. They cannot be trusted." Maya had expected this response. She touched her personal communicator again, but this time the signal she sent was different. Deep in space, automated systems that had been dormant for 3 years suddenly activated. Ancient human defense satellites, hidden throughout the galaxy, and powered by fusion cores designed to last centuries, came online and began broadcasting their locations. "You speak of human deception, Ambassador," Maya said as new displays filled the chamber. "Let me show you human preparation." The holographic maps revealed something that made several delegates gasp in shock. Hundreds of automated defense platforms, positioned in strategic locations throughout Council space, all powered up and scanning for threats. Each one carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet. The Earth government installed these systems over 50 years ago, Maya explained. They were designed to activate only if humanity faced complete extinction. My presence here, alive and speaking the correct authorization codes, has awakened them all. Panic began to spread through the chamber. Military advisors whispered urgently to their delegates. Security forces checked their weapons while scanning for immediate threats. The Vorth delegation looked especially nervous as they realized that several defense platforms were positioned near their homeworld. But Maya's next words surprised everyone. "These platforms will not fire," she announced. "They are not weapons of revenge. They are tools of justice." She gestured, and the defense satellites began transmitting new data, not targeting information or weapon specifications, but evidence. Detailed records of every communication, every financial transaction, every military movement that had led to humanity's destruction. The satellites had been recording everything for 3 years, building a complete legal case against the conspirators. "Human law recognizes something called proportional justice," Maya continued. "Punishment should fit the crime, and justice should serve the living rather than simply satisfy the dead. I did not come here seeking the extinction of your species. I came seeking truth, accountability, and the prevention of future genocides." The Lyran delegate, Thais, suddenly stood up in her observation area. "The memory codes support this approach. Truth-telling and justice-seeking honor both the dead and the living." Other progressive delegates began to speak. The aquatic Mer representative admitted publicly that her people had been coerced into supporting human extinction. The crystalline shard delegate pulsed with light patterns that their translation system rendered as "great shame. Debt must be paid." But the conservative factions pushed back harder. The mantid delegate clicked his mandibles aggressively. "You threaten us with ancient weapons and demand we submit to human judgment. This proves that your species was always dangerous." Maya had been waiting for this moment. She activated her final revelation, the one that would either save the galaxy or destroy any hope of peaceful resolution. "I am not here as humanity's judge," she said. "I am here as humanity's representative, and on behalf of my species, I offer you something that apparently your cultures have forgotten how to give." She paused, letting the tension build throughout the chamber. "Forgiveness." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Delegates who had been preparing for war or revenge suddenly found themselves facing something they had not expected from a genocide survivor. "Forgiveness does not mean forgetting," Maya continued. "It does not mean avoiding consequences or accountability, but it means choosing a future over vengeance. It means building something better rather than destroying what exists." She gestured toward the defense satellites still visible on the holographic displays. "These platforms will be deactivated and dismantled, but only after the galaxy agrees to specific changes. First, the establishment of a Genocide Prevention Council with representatives from all species, including the survivors of any future extinction attempts. Second, mandatory transparency in all interspecies diplomatic communications. Third, the creation of memorial zones where destroyed civilizations can be remembered and, when possible, restored." Ambassador Krell stood up from his delegation platform. "You offer forgiveness while holding weapons to our throats. This is coercion, not justice." Maya turned to face the Vorth leader directly. "Ambassador, 3 years ago your people coerced, bribed and threatened half the galaxy into supporting genocide. You used economic warfare and military threats to destroy an entire species. I'm offering you the chance to help build systems that will prevent anyone from ever doing that again. If you see coercion in that offer, perhaps you should examine your own conscience." The chamber fell silent again. Maya could see delegates calculating political costs, weighing the risks of accepting her terms against the consequences of refusing. The human defense platforms made military resistance impossible, but her offer of forgiveness made cooperation genuinely attractive. The turning point came from an unexpected source. A junior member of the Vorth delegation, a young reptilian female, Maya had not seen before, stood up and spoke in her own language. The translation systems rendered her words. Elder Krell, this human offers us honor debt resolution. Our own codes require acceptance. Krell turned on his subordinate with fury, but other Vorth began speaking. Maya realized that not all members of their species had supported the genocide. Some had been horrified by their leadership's actions and had spent 3 years living with guilt and shame. The debate continued for hours as delegates argued in their native languages, while translation systems worked overtime. Maya stood patiently on the speaking platform, watching as the galaxy's leadership struggled with concepts they had not considered in decades. Justice without vengeance, accountability without destruction, progress without war. Eventually, the Lyran delegate called for a formal vote on Maya's proposals. The Genocide Prevention Council, mandatory diplomatic transparency, and memorial zones for destroyed civilizations would require unanimous approval to become galactic law. One by one, the species cast their votes. The Mer voted yes, their aquatic representative stating that her people wanted to honor their debt to human ocean researchers. The Shard pulsed approval, their light patterns expressing gratitude for the translation technologies humans had provided. Even the normally aggressive mantids voted for the proposals, swayed by the knowledge that human medical research could have saved millions of their people. The critical moment came when the Vorth delegation prepared to vote. Ambassador Krell looked around the chamber, seeing his traditional allies abandoning him and his own people divided. The young female who had spoken earlier stood again and said, I call for new leadership selection according to honor debt protocols. Maya watched as Vorth political tradition played out before her eyes. When a leader brought shame to the clan through dishonorable actions, younger members could challenge for immediate replacement. Other Vorth delegates began standing, one after another, until Krell was isolated and outnumbered. The new Vorth representative, the young female named Zara, approached the voting platform. The Vorth cast our vote for justice and healing. We accept responsibility for our role in human extinction and commit to preventing future genocides. The vote was unanimous. Over the following months, Maya worked with delegates from all species to establish the new galactic systems. The Genocide Prevention Council received independent funding and the authority to investigate any allegations of systematic species persecution. Diplomatic transparency protocols required all interspecies negotiations to be recorded and archived, preventing the secret deals that had made human extinction possible. Most importantly, the Sol system was declared a memorial zone where human civilization could eventually be rebuilt. The scattered survivors began returning from their hiding places throughout the galaxy, bringing with them 3 years of hard-won knowledge about survival, adaptation, and the importance of never giving up hope. Maya stood in the observation deck of the new human embassy, watching as the first reconstruction ships entered Earth's orbit. The planet was still scarred from the bombardment, but human technology and alien assistance were slowly healing the wounds. Children who had never seen their homeworld were taking their first steps on restored continents. Dr. Lisa Hayes had accepted the position of Reconstruction Director, coordinating the massive effort to rebuild human civilization with help from species who wanted to repay their debt. David Park led the engineering teams that were constructing new cities designed to welcome both human and alien residents. Even Agent Blue had emerged from the shadows to establish new diplomatic protocols that would prevent future misunderstandings. The first human children born on Earth in 3 years will arrive next month, Dr. Hayes reported through the communication system. And the Mer have offered to help restore the oceans using techniques they developed with our researchers 50 years ago. Maya nodded and made notes for her daily report to the Council. As humanity's official representative, she spent most of her time now in meetings, negotiations, and diplomatic ceremonies. It was very different from her original career as a xenobiologist, but someone had to speak for her species in the new galactic order. The hardest part was not the politics or the endless bureaucracy. It was the knowledge that billions of humans had died unnecessarily, victims of fear and greed, and the simple failure of imagination that prevented different species from seeing each other as people instead of threats. But Maya had learned something important during her 3 years among the refugees and outcasts of the galaxy. Grief and anger were natural responses to loss, but they could not build the future. Only hope, determination, and the willingness to work with former enemies could create something better than what had been destroyed. Her personal communicator chimed with a message from Earth. Maya smiled as she read the report from the agricultural teams. The first human-grown crops were ready for harvest, and the yield was 20% higher than expected thanks to soil improvements developed by Chloran plant scientists. Maya touched the small memorial pin she wore on her diplomatic robes, honoring the billions who had died when Earth burned. They would never see the new world being built from the ashes of their civilization, but their sacrifice had not been meaningless if it prevented future genocides and taught the galaxy that some stories refuse to die even when someone tries to kill them. Outside the embassy windows, human and alien children played together in the gardens that had been planted where weapons platforms once stood. Maya watched them laugh and run and argue about the rules of games that mixed traditions from a dozen different worlds. That was the future she had fought for. Not revenge against the species that had tried to destroy humanity, but the chance for all children to grow up in a galaxy where differences were celebrated instead of feared, where questions were welcomed instead of suppressed, and where the phrase "never again" actually meant something. The human story had ended 3 years ago when Earth died, but Maya had learned that endings were just new beginnings waiting for someone brave enough to write the next chapter.